Right, we're back again. And since we've done the VFC FAL and we've done the G3 by VFC as well, it's time we address this elephant in the room. It's the WE M14. I call it the elephant because it is the other 7.62 gas blowback rifle that you've probably seen in the background at some point that I haven't even talked about yet. So we're going to talk about it today. This is actually the second one that I had. The first one I had to sell. I regretted it and I was fortunate enough to get another one. It's not really been used, and the reason for that we'll go into throughout the video. But it's a very rarely seen gas blowback rifle, to be fair. And there are some good reasons for that, and there are some less good reasons for that. I think the first one is that this was one of the more expensive WE rifles. This was around, I think, £500 when they were readily available. It's not as popular model as the G3s and the FALs, either real world or in airsoft. And a lot of that's down to the ergonomics of the M14 itself, and also it's lack of popularity in modern media. They were really big as an AEG when Black Hawk Down was a big film, because it was the DMR rifle used by Randy Shugart in that film, with a aim point, and I think he didn't have a suppressor on it, but it was all painted up. It looked really cool, and people were into M14s for a while, and the TM AEG is actually a rather good one. The G&G AEG was the first G&G AEG they ever made, and it was dog shit, but it's an AEG, so we're not going to go too much into that. So the WE one, it's a big, heavy chunk. It really is. Very, very weighty, and the ergonomics aren't great. With this comb style stock, this traditional stock, it actually gets rather wearing on the wrist really quickly, and it's quite a bulky rifle, much bulkier than the FAL. The WE has got this composite stock, which is actually very accurate to the real one. Not many of the real ones stayed in service with the wooden stock, so I did want to get a wooden stock, but never really got around to it. But the polymer stock is actually quite common with the real rifles as well. They feed from a 20 round gas magazine, which can be extended on the WE to 30 with an optional spring that comes with them, but I keep mine as 20. The magazines are actually rather weighty as well. They are there's a dent in that one from a BB. They are a reasonably reliable magazine, to be fair. We'll just check the materials on that. We'll get the magnet, because I didn't get that in advance. But as you can see, it is a steel bodied magazine, which is nice. They are of the rock and lock design, which is typical of rifles of that era, so you put the toe in and rock it back. They do wobble around a little bit more than the FAL or the G. It's not horrendous, it doesn't really affect them that much, but it is worth noting that they rock more than an FAL or a G3 magazine, just due to the way they fit and how the stock is on the rifle. The bolt carrier itself is actually a reasonably weighty assembly, because this is a reciprocating charging handle, so with each round fired, that entire charging unit does come back, and as you can hear, it's got quite a metallic clank to it, and it does make quite a racket when you fire these as well. I'll put some gas in it, 'cause it's been sat stored for ages, and the gas has obviously leaked out a little bit. The platform itself is actually reasonably accurate. It's got a very long barrel, VSR style hot rubber, so it can be made very accurate. However, there is a couple of design flaws, or one major design flaw. that has prevented this from being a successful gas blowback rifle. And to show you that, I'm going to break it down. But first, let's show you some of the features. So we have a steel trigger guard, an alloy trigger. The tappet plate is steel. The bolt assembly is steel. The bolt carrier cover, this little cover plate, is not. There's some steel on the top receiver. The main receiver is an alloy. Obviously you've got this plastic polymer heat shield and a polymer handguard. And when it comes to the barrel, the gas tube is alloy, but the ring holding it on is steel. And the barrel is actually steel, which I didn't realise before. So that's a nice, pleasant surprise. The flash hider is not steel. But the amount of steel on there is actually quite a lot when you consider this is an older gas blowback rifle and steel wasn't as common. So if we break this down really quickly. Oh, there's a selector catch here, by the way, so it has got semi-auto and full auto. You'd never want to use full auto on this, it would be pretty pointless. But if we lift up the trigger guard, we can remove the trigger assembly, and that allows us to take off the stock, and this brings us to the receiver. To strip these down, they're a little bit more involving, so if you want to get the bolt carrier out, they are a little bit more involving. You don't really need to go that far, so we won't. You've got the mock gas piston, so they've done quite a nice job of that, but they're not as nice as the FAL or the G3 to strip down. And whilst we've got the trigger assembly out, let's just put that tappet plate back, we come to the major weakness of the WE M14 platform, and that is this two-piece trigger unit. Because if you see here, this main knocker box here fits inside the trigger assembly, and it could have done with being one piece, and our ATEC actually do a one piece unit, because what happens is this flexes and it causes either a stiff or a dead trigger. It's actually quite horrendous when it happens. You pull the trigger and nothing happens, and that is the main fault with the M14. I don't recommend our ATEC parts normally, apart from their end pass. The M14 is the one place where this trigger box, I would recommend the ATEC one. However, I'm working on a different method to ensure these stay together, a bit of a hillbilly method. I'll get around to doing it at some point, because I'm not going to spend on the ATEC box for the little amount of use this gets. But it's well replicated. They replicated the real rifle rather well. But unfortunately, it's just not been robustly manufactured, as it were, which is a shame. And as you can see, it's not releasing that trigger right now. So what happened is you go to pull a trigger, and that is a dead trigger, and it's because these parts here have bent away from each other, and it causes issues with the trigger mechanism. I will fire this for you in a moment, but that's the main part that goes wrong with the WE M14. And this is a pretty much unused example as well. It's been used for, I think, one special event, Black Hawk Down event, and one Vietnam event, and as you can see, that trigger pull is pretty horrendous. You have to really pull the trigger to get it to let go of the sear, and it's not ideal at all. But let's just get some gas in this magazine. As I said, these can be made to be actually an accurate platform, but it's just that trigger unit that lets it down. The blowback is actually quite crisp, as you'll see in a moment, but it's certainly, with the lighter bolt carrier and the very heavy stock assembly, it doesn't translate to a lot of felt recoil compared to the FAL and the G3. and also being that older WE system, which is just less efficient overall, which is a bit of a shame. It has no dry fire switch, so this is going to lock open. Also, if you don't insert that magazine fully and make sure it's in, you will get a hiss of gas. The bolt catch is over here, so we'll press that forward. And if we point that in a safe direction, sorry, try and do it on camera. Point that in a safe direction. I don't know if you can see, but I'm having to really, really pull that trigger. It's actually quite unpleasant, and that is down to that faulty two-piece trigger unit. So if I pull that trigger and it hits the wall and it feels like it's not going, but if you pull it through, it pulls through. But it's not a satisfying trigger at all. Bolt locks open on empty, as you can see, and you can either, with a loaded magazine, pull the charging handle back to release it once you've got a loaded magazine in there, or you can hit the bolt release on this side of the rifle. Also on this side of the rifle, you'll see that there's a threaded hole there for the M14 side mount. While we're here, we may as well turn that selector over so you can see the auto. So as you can see, it's got a decent rate of fire, but you wouldn't want to use that with the 20 round magazines. If we remove that magazine out for a moment. On the back of the stock, we have the sheep's hook, which is actually very useful on this. Because of the ergonomics of this stock, you do tend to use that sheep's hook quite a bit. Also down here, there's a hatchway for keeping tools in, replicated from the rear one. And then underneath there is your rear sling loop, which has got a little bit of side-to-side movement, but it's really solid. You can happily use that for your sling. On the front, there's your steel sling loop on the front. Again, it's solid enough to use a sling. You can remove the muzzle by undoing this lock nut here, and it slides the front off, revealing that 14mm negative thread. So you can replace the entire front assembly with a suppressor. Apologies, I'm trying to keep this in frame, but it's such a long rifle. So you can put a suppressor on there, but you lose the front sight if you do so. So if you are going to use the suppressor, I would recommend having an M14 side mount. This piece here can be removed. This is a stripper clip guide. That is removed with an Allen key just down in that hole there. I kept this one in because it doesn't hurt at all. But some sight mounts you do find you have to remove that because this stripper clip guide will get in the way. But overall, it's not a bad rifle, apart from that trigger, and it just really lets it down. So if you are going to get a WE M14, I highly recommend finding an RA Tech trigger box housing. You don't need the whole trigger box. They're a waste of money. Just get the housing. So you've got that one piece housing, and that way it stops that flex, which then reduces the trigger pull back to a nicer, crisper trigger. Otherwise, I would say get the M14 if you really want an M14. But if you want a 7.62 style gas blowback rifle, I'd recommend pretty much any other platform. So especially the FAL and the G3, but even like SR25s and Sky H's and 417s are going to be ergonomically way nicer to use. But there is something alluring and classic about this, and I think we'll probably follow this video up at some point with the other rifle in that pairing in Black Hawk Down, which is the M733. I also need to re-upload the VFC M249 video because unfortunately I filmed it on a GoPro and the GoPro split the footage and it's been a nightmare trying to put it back together, so I'm just going to have to refilm it on this phone. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments below. Please share the video, etc, like that. It's nice to get out there. I'm doing this purely because I've got an interest in gas blowbacks. I've been around for a very long time and I think it's about time I pass some of this along. And I think people find it interesting. But I do just do these out of killing some time, really, and because I've got the collection here. And also other people have offered to loan me things for videos, which I'll get around to once I've done what's in this room. Anyway, speak to you all soon. Thank you for watching again. Apologies we didn't really go super in depth with this, but there's actually not a lot to this rifle. I will say the hop in this feeds beautifully on 2.8s or even 3s as stock, and I haven't messed with the hop unit. You can put any VSR style hop rubber in here, and it's got a great long barrel, so it could be a good DMR platform if it wasn't for that trigger, and if it wasn't for the fact that it's just a bit of a clunky platform to use. If you want to get the Sage stock version, the EBR version of this, it's at your own peril. It has the same problem with the trigger, and it's actually about twice as heavy and awkward and nightmare, but some people like the EBR. Personally, I never have. Anyway, speak to you all soon. Thanks for watching. Speak to you soon.